So Deep Retrofit is about looking at the shell of the building, looking at things like wall insulation, triple glazing, roof insulation, those sorts of things. But it's also about looking at things like air quality in the building, mechanical air ventilation systems, using heat recovery on those systems so that as we draw cold air in, we preheat that with warm air that we're moving out of the building. In addition to that, it would be looking at some of the renewable energy technologies like solar thermal or photovoltaic cells. Those sorts of things that bring a complete package, a holistic view to the refurbishment of a property in order to make it more energy efficient. Well, I think really what we need to think about is the fact that we have a large housing stock worth over 5 trillion in the UK. And amongst that housing stock, 23 million or so houses that are 20% of those were built before 1919, and only a few, 24%, were built after the 1980s. So a vast majority of those sit in that middle bracket, and housing at that time was just not built with energy efficiency in mind. So by actually going through a process of deep retrofit, what we can do is refit those houses, not only with insulation, but we can also look at renewable technologies as well. And ultimately that will get us to a point where we can turn a house into what we would describe as a net zero energy house. So the term net zero energy, in simple terms, if you consider that these houses, once they've gone through a deep retrofit, will probably use about 50% of their energy drawn from the grid. But because we're using renewable technologies as well, the house itself will actually be able to return energy to the grid. And what we're looking at is a net zero balance. So the energy that we draw is also put back again, and as a consequence, we describe that as net zero energy. I think one of the interesting things just recently on the news has been these stories about air quality and the impact that air quality is having on young people, for example. And we're seeing a lot more asthma sufferers, but also seizures and other complexities as a consequence of bad air quality. And a lot of that will be due to the fact that we are using a lot of fossil fuels, which are impacting on the air quality. So if we can actually create homes that are more energy efficient and therefore less reliant on fossil fuels, that will help in some respects. But over and above that, things like mechanical air ventilation and filtering will mean that we will be able to improve the air quality inside the home as well. The other thing that we will be able to do is to improve the temperatures in homes and not get these vast fluctuations between hot and cold, but actually a standardised temperature again will help to contribute to people's health. So it's very much about looking at what we can do in order to improve people's quality of life, both in the home and outside, as well as actually responding to the 2050 targets with regards to carbon. Well, I think a number of key barriers that we've experienced is that there's not been a great drive from government, to be frank. We need a much clearer strategy. There are 2.4 million homes in the UK that we could apply this strategy to now without having to get into any complex analysis. Those homes are available for deep retrofit now. So we need some guidance and we need some clear drive in order to be able to help to meet those 2050 targets. But in addition to that, we also need to upskill the supply chain. And we've had some attempts at that and we've been marginally successul, but I don't think that we've actually really encapsulated the imperative. And as a consequence, we haven't got people who have become enthusiastic about this. And then of course the other thing that we have to consider as well is that the end user has to perceive that there are some benefits, and that's why doing these sorts of pilots, the one in Nottingham, which is mentioned in the report, and also the new pilot that's starting in Essex, which is my home county, They're a real opportunity to demonstrate that there is some real benefit and return from doing this kind of work. The challenge in the next step will be finding the early adopters, the people that are prepared to take the long-term view and recognise the fact that by investing in their property, they're actually contributing to social good, but they're also receiving a return on their investment. And as I've said, we know that we can get returns on investment of 15%, and that's much better than some of the rates that we're being offered in investment with just straightforward cash. So there are good reasons to do this, but it does mean that we need to find people who are prepared to be those early adopters and to set the example. I think what is interesting is that young people, when they're looking for jobs, are looking for organisations that have some corporate social responsibility element to them. And I think what we will find is that as future generations go forward, they'll also look at how they can contribute socially to the benefit of all within society. And so I think there is an opportunity there to exploit that and use that as a method to drive this forward. I think one of the most exciting things about Energiesprong is it's finally taken a holistic view. What we've had previously is a number of small attempts, so the feed-in tariffs and those sorts of things, warm homes, those sorts of things have all been parts of this package. But actually what we've got with Deep Retrofit is an opportunity to bring all of those things together in one solution. And as I say, if we can be holistic in our view with regards to our homes, perhaps we can encourage people to be holistic with regards to society in general and the way in which we can improve quality of life for everyone.